Hello everyone, and welcome to Once Before Dawn. I am the storyteller, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also comment, where are you from and what time are you watching? The House That Watches. Claire hadn't meant to stay so late. The sun had already started bleeding into the hills behind her when she finally noticed how far she'd wandered from the edge of the village. She had taken the narrow deer trails again, not because she was careless, but because that's where the quiet was. Claire liked the kind of quiet you could listen to. She was 16, lanky, freckled, and often seen as strange. Not for how she spoke, which was rarely, but for how much she noticed. While other kids played or swiped their fingers across cracked screens, Claire sketched old barns and listened to trees creak. She knew where the owls nested and when the wind would shift, and she always avoided the place the other children whispered about. Until now. She hadn't even realized it was behind the trees until she looked up and saw the crooked weather vane above the blackened roof. It spun in no wind at all. Claire froze. The house wasn't supposed to be there. She had never been brave enough to get this close before. It stood alone, broken but not ruined. The windows were jagged teeth. The front door slouched off its hinges like a jaw unhinged. She remembered what the others said. It watches you. Don't look in the windows. No one who goes in ever comes out the same. She had laughed with them, small, nervous laughs. But she never mocked the house. Not out loud. Not like Ben and Maria and the other kids, who threw rocks at the fence and ran away shrieking. But maybe it was because of them that she now stood here. A week ago they had dared her. You think you're better than us, Claire. You stare at clouds all day. Bet you wouldn't last 10 seconds past the gate. And Claire, always so quiet, had said, bet I would. The next day they had pushed her closer. She'd walked a few paces beyond the old willow tree, then turned back, pretending to laugh, pretending she wasn't shaking. But now, she stood just outside the gate, alone. The iron gate was more rust than metal. Thin vines twisted through its bars, choking it like hands afraid to let go. Claire reached out and touched the cold metal. The wind stopped. A bird chirped once. Then silence. Her fingers lingered on the gate. The metal was oddly warm. She pushed. The gate creaked open with a sound like a groan underwater. And suddenly she was stepping onto the overgrown path, her boots crunching ancient gravel. Her heartbeat, once timid, now thundered in her ears. The house loomed above her. Every window seemed darker than the sky, each one reflecting nothing, not even her. Claire swallowed. Just to the porch, she whispered. Her own voice startled her in the stillness. The porch steps sagged under her weight. She placed one foot, then another, testing each plank. The wood didn't creak. It breathed. A soft exhale, as though the house recognized her. The door was already ajar. She hadn't touched it. A strip of blackness greeted her, thicker than shadow. Not the dark of night, the dark of something else. Something buried. She leaned forward. A smell rose to meet her. Not rot, not mold. Something like forgotten time, the scent of old breath held too long in sealed lungs. Inside, the hallway stretched farther than the house should have allowed. Faded wallpaper peeled in long strips. A cracked mirror hung on the right wall, too high to reflect anything but the ceiling. Claire! She spun around. The yard behind her was empty. Claire! She spun around. The yard behind her was empty, held on in sealed lungs. She hadn't imagined it. The voice had come from inside. It hadn't sounded threatening. It had sounded tired. Claire stepped inside. The floorboards flexed but didn't snap. The air was heavier now, filled with a hum she felt in her bones. The hum of attention, like the walls were listening. And then a whisper close to her ear. You came back. Claire froze where she stood. The whisper had been just behind her ear, soft, as though carried on breath that never quite warmed the skin. She spun again, expecting something. A shadow, a figure, even the outline of a person ducking behind a corner. But the hallway remained unchanged. Dust floated in the heavy air, slow and deliberate. The wallpaper on the left curled like old skin, and under it Claire thought she saw patterns. Not paint, not wallpaper. Carvings, symbols. Something about them made her stomach knot. Spirals, eyes, marks that bent into themselves like they were meant to confuse. She took a cautious step forward. Her boots left clear prints in the dust. No other footprints, no signs of vermin or weather. It was as though the house had been sealed in time, preserved just for her. A door to her right stood slightly open. Inside, a living room, or what had once been one. The furniture was rotted, collapsed into heaps of mildew and splinters. A couch lay like a corpse, its stuffing ripped out in tufts. A coffee table overturned, a fireplace long cold, choked with ash, and above it a photograph. Framed in black, the photo showed a family, a man, a woman, and a girl. All three with matching eyes, large, almond-shaped, slightly too wide, their irises so pale they looked almost white. Claire leaned in. The girl looked familiar, like someone Claire had passed on the street or maybe seen in a dream. Under the frame, a strip of brass read, "We watch because we must." Before she could study it further, the door behind her creaked, not swung, not blown, but moved gently, deliberately. She turned, slowly, and found the hallway had shifted. The entrance was gone. No more door. Just hallway stretching deeper, impossibly long, the perspective warping, as though the house was rearranging itself while she wasn't looking. She whispered, "I'm dreaming." She backed into the living room looking for something, anything, that made sense. But the window was bricked up from the outside, not boarded, bricked, as if someone had sealed the house from within. Then, footsteps above her, slow, heavy, rhythmic. 1, 2, 3, a pause. Then, dragging, like something no longer walked quite right, Claire pressed herself against the wall. Freegern, a light switch. Found a light switch. She flicked it. Nothing's found a light switch. She flicked it. Nothing. Of course not. But as her hand withdrew, she noticed something. Smudges, handprints, small, childlike prints smeared along the wall, as if something had been crawling across it. Not walking, not standing, crawling. She stepped away. Too fast. The floor shifted beneath her. A sudden groan, like the house was reacting, not just settling, like a creature flinching. Like a creature flinching. Then came a voice. This one clearer, more conversational. Then came a voice. This one clearer, more conversational. A woman's voice, calm and melodic, as though speaking to a guest. "You mustn't go upstairs yet. They're not ready for you." Claire's mouth went dry. "Who's there?" No answer. But the floorboard just outside the living room groaned again. Something had stepped into the hall. Claire peeked. The hallway was still empty. But the light had changed. It had gone bluer, like moonlight filtered through deep water. And now, further down, she saw the first sign of movement. Standing completely still. No detail, just the vague outline of something humanoid. Tall, thin, the kind of shape your eyes refused to focus on. She blinked. It was gone. Claire backed away slowly. Her heel struck something. She turned, startled, to find a small velvet chair where there hadn't been one seconds before. A teacup sat on its cushion, full and steaming, not dusty, not cold, fresh. Claire whispered, "This isn't real." The kind people make when something obvious is said out loud. Then a voice whispered, clearer than before, "You're late." Claire stared at the steaming teacup as if it might answer for the voice. It was real, or seemed real. The faint curl of vapor, the sheen of porcelain, the thin silver band along its rim. Even the scent, bergamot and something darker, earthier, like wet leaves and rust. She backed away from the chair. No more sounds came from the hallway, no footsteps, no whispers. Just silence. Until the house shifted again. She didn't see it happen, only that the hallway behind her no longer led where it had a moment before. The shadows bent differently now, and a new light flickered down the corridor, red, pulsing, rhythmic like a heartbeat. She turned toward it. A low thrum vibrated through the walls, drawing her forward. Not forcefully, but with suggestion, like a dream tugging at her feet. She followed it. The walls leaned in, close enough for her shoulders to brush against peeling wallpaper. Dust fell in drifts from above, stirred by her breath alone. Her steps grew quieter, as if the house didn't want to disturb whatever was ahead. The red light led her to a door. Old wood, cracked and bowed, but not rotting. Its surface bore scratches, deep gouges layered like claws. Some of them were small and frenzied. Others deliberate, counted. Others deliberate, counted, almost ceremonial. She hesitated. Not out of politeness, more to break the quiet. She wasn't expecting a response, but one came. "Come in." The voice was that of a girl. Not quite a child, not quite an adult. Young, but not innocent. Claire's heart stuttered. Her hand trembled as she grasped the doorknob. It turned too easily. Inside, the room was lit in a low red glow. There were no lamps, no bulbs. The light bled from the very walls like it seeped through cracks in reality. The walls were covered in paper, newspaper clippings, old photos, symbols drawn in what she told herself was red ink. A girl sat cross-legged in the center of the room, on a threadbare rug. She wore a pale white dress, stained with dark splatters around the hem. Her hair was thick and black, hanging like a curtain over her face. Claire opened her mouth, but no words came. The girl raised her head slowly. She looked ordinary. Pale skin, wide dark eyes, thin lips, but her expression, calm, too calm, chilled Claire more than any shadow had. "I was waiting for you," the girl said softly. Claire found her voice. "Who are you?" The girl tilted her head. "Don't you remember?" Claire shook her head slowly. A beat. "Then you were here before." "No," Claire said. "I wasn't. I've never." The girl cut her off. "Not in this body." Claire blinked. The girl smiled. "They always come back. That's the rule." "What are you talking about?" "Every watcher returns. When the house is ready, when it's hungry." Claire stepped back. "I don't know what this is, but I'm leaving." The girl's smile faded. "No, not yet." Behind Claire, the door slammed shut with a sound like thunder trapped in a coffin. She spun and grabbed the knob. Locked. The girl rose to her feet. Her dress dragged along the floor, brushing across strange chalk markings on the rug. "They keep us here, you know," she said. "Who? The ones who built this place?" "No," she said. "Who?" "The ones who built this place. Van Grand. They fed the house with memory, with us." "I don't understand," Claire whispered. "You don't have to. You just have to watch." Her eyes sharpened. "That's what you were chosen for. I didn't choose this." "No one ever does." The girl stepped forward. The temperature dropped. Claire could see her own breath now, little clouds in the red glow. "What's your name?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. Not fear, not entirely. Something like recognition. A distant ache, like déjà vu beneath the skin. The girl touched Claire's wrist. Images flooded her mind, too fast to grasp. Faces screaming in candlelight. A long table set with rusting cutlery. A voice repeating her name in a dozen tones. A tall figure with no eyes leaning close to whisper, "One of us." Then it all vanished. The room was dark now. The red light had gone out. The red light had gone out. Claire was alone. Gressis. Claire's breath came fast now, shallow and cold. She couldn't see the walls anymore, or the door, or even her own hands. The silence had teeth. It pressed against her ears like she was sinking underwater, deeper and deeper into some place she should never have entered. She tried to move, forward, backward, anything, but the floor beneath her was gone. No sensation. No sensation. No rug, no gravity, only cold air and the gnawing awareness of being watched. "Can you hear me?" No response. Her pulse pounded. "Is anyone there?" Still nothing. Then a soft giggle, not cruel, not playful, just lost. Like a child amused by a joke, only they understood. Claire turned sharply toward the sound, though she could see nothing, and then she heard the voice again, faint, familiar. The girl. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It always takes something." "What does?" No reply. "Claire," she whispered, "it always takes something." "What does?" No reply. Claire lost. Like a child amused by a joke, only they understood. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, a faint blue light returned, not from a lamp or a bulb, but from above. It filtered down like moonlight through deep water, casting shadows that bent in unnatural directions. She was no longer in the red room. The walls had changed. They were stone now, old, wet stone etched with carvings she couldn't read. The air smelled of mildew and salt, like the inside of a well, and in front of her was a staircase, spiral. The same staircase she saw in dreams she could never remember fully. With no other path visible, Claire began to descend. Each step echoed too long, as if the staircase existed in an endless shaft. She passed doors. None had knobs, only keyholes. Some of them oozed a thick, dark fluid that dripped onto the stone and evaporated instantly. Others vibrated, like something was breathing behind them. She knelt and looked through the keyhole. Darkness again, but not empty. A shape moved inside. It was hunched, and its limbs bent wrong, like a spider trying to crawl inside a coffin. It rocked gently, whispering to itself. Then it stopped, and turned toward the keyhole. Its eye, massive, wet, white, blinked once, then pressed against the hole. Claire jerked back, heart racing. A deep thud came from inside the room, then silence. She didn't look again. More whispers. One called her name, not in menace, but in pleading. "Claire, please, come back. You said you'd come back." She gritted her teeth and walked faster. Down, down, until the stairs opened into a new space. A circular chamber, wide and impossibly tall. Its ceiling vanished into darkness. The walls were covered in mirrors, thousands of them, all sizes, all shapes, none matching. Each one reflected something slightly wrong, not just a warped image, a wrong one, until the stairs older. In others, her eyes were black voids. One showed her sleeping, her mouth sewn shut. Another showed her watching this very room as if she were already inside. Then she noticed the center, a stone table. On it, a book bound in pale leather. The cover bore no title. She stepped forward. The moment her hand brushed the book, a voice spoke behind her. "You shouldn't read ahead." Claire turned. The girl in the white dress stood just behind her, no longer smiling. Her eyes were darker now, rimmed in shadow. "I thought you were gone." "I never left," she said. "Neither will you." Claire looked back at the book. Her name was written on the spine now, slowly appearing as if inked by an invisible hand. She whispered, "What is this place?" "A memory," the girl said. "Whose?" "Ours." The pages began to turn on their own, windless, effortless. Claire saw sketches, charcoal drawings of faces screaming, places she'd never visited. Charcoal drawings of faces screaming, places she'd never visited. A beach where the waves whispered in dead languages. And then, on the final page, a drawing of her, alone, in this room. Staring at the book, she looked up, but the girl was gone. Only her voice remained. The house remembers. It always does. The room was empty again. Claire stood still, staring at the drawing of herself in the book. Her mouth was dry, her hands shaking slightly. Every part of her screamed to step away from the table, but her feet wouldn't listen. Something about the image held her, trapped her. Behind her, the mirrors remained silent. But something in them shimmered, like light moving just behind the glass. Not reflections, not illusions, observers. She looked back at the book, but it was closed. Just like that. And her name was gone from the spine. The table, too, had changed. What had once been cold, cracked stone was now dark wood, smooth and polished, inlaid with symbols that pulsed faintly with violet light, as though the house was breathing through the grain. Then, footsteps, not above this time, not behind her, beneath, slow, measured. Claire stepped back as the table began to rise, not levitating, but pushed upward by something from beneath. Stone crumbled, dust plumed. And then it emerged, not a creature, not at first glance. It wore a long black robe made of something that shimmered like oil, but moved like smoke. Its hands were long, skin stretched tight, bones like willow branches. Where its face should have been, there was a mask, bone-white, featureless, except for a single vertical slit where the mouth might be. It did not breathe. It simply was. Claire froze, heart hammering. She tried to speak but couldn't. The being spoke first. "You are Claire Ellen Vale," it said, voice low and hollow, like someone speaking into a stone well. It was neither masculine nor feminine, more a presence than a sound. "You have returned." Claire blinked. "Returned?" she managed, her voice a whisper. "You were once a watcher. You were taken. You were offered back. And now the cycle completes." "I don't understand." She backed away another step. "You will." The figure tilted its head. "All those who see the house and remember are called. You remembered even if you forgot." "That makes no sense," she said. "To you." A long pause. Then it extended one hand. "Read," it said. "I already looked at the book. You saw the story the house let you see." Its head shifted slightly. "Now see your true page." The book reopened. Claire didn't move, but the pages turned again, fast now, flipping with a rush of unseen wind. A smell filled the air. Must and ink and something ancient. Pages blurred, then stopped. This time there was no drawing. There was a photograph. Of her. There was a photograph. She was. In her lap, a stuffed fox she hadn't seen in years. Her hair was longer, tangled. Her eyes were wide. Behind her, the front door of the house loomed, and in the reflection of the glass, a face. The mask. The archivist had been there even then. "No," she whispered. "You came once in a dream. The house touched you. You never told anyone. Not your mother. Not your father." "How do you know that? You were mother? Not your father. How do you know that? You were marked." "Do you know what a watcher is?" Claire shook her head. "One who witnesses the memory of the house. One who guards the record of those who never left, those who were absorbed." Claire's voice cracked. "You mean people died here?" "Some. Others were changed." The mirrors shuddered. The archivist raised its long hand and touched one of them. Instantly, the surface turned black, not like darkness, but like ink. It rippled, showing something beneath. A room, a child. Mouth open in a silent scream that never ended. Claire stepped back. "What do you want from me? To remember?" The walls seemed to close in. The mirrors pulsed with light. Whispered voices filled the air again, but this time they were clearer. "She's the last one. Don't let her go. She must stay. She must stay. She must stay. She must," Claire shouted. "No!" The room went still. The archivist leaned close. "When you leave," it said softly, "you will not remember this place, not fully. But it will call you again, when the time is right, when the house is hungry. I don't want this. No one does, not the first time." And then everything cracked. The floor beneath her split, the room above shattered like glass, and Claire fell. Claire expected pain when she hit the ground, a jolt, a scream, the crack of bone, but there was nothing. She opened her eyes to find herself standing in a wheat field under a sky the color of rust, the color of trust. The sun, if it was a sun, hung low and enormous, pulsing like a dying star. The wind didn't move. The air was dry and sharp, like paper scraping skin. All around her, the wheat swayed in slow, unnatural waves, though there was no breeze. Claire spun in place. The field was endless. No house, no staircase, no mirrors, and yet she didn't feel alone. Something here was watching. She began to walk. The wheat was waist-high and rough, the stalks cracking when she touched them. There was no sense of time. No sun moving, no birds, no clouds. Only that steady, almost deliberate hum in the back of her skull, like something trying to tune her into its frequency. After a few minutes, if minutes meant anything here, Claire saw a shape in the distance. Small, angular, shimmering in the heat like a mirage. She quickened her pace. As she drew near, it resolved into a cottage. One window, one door. It resolved into a cottage. One window, one door. Its stone walls were mossy, as if mints meant anything here. A well stood beside it, dry and filled with ash. Claire stepped onto the worn stone path. The door was open. Inside, the cottage was dim, but not dark. Dust floated in golden beams of light from cracks in the ceiling. An old iron stove, a rocking chair, shelves of yellowed books, and in the far corner a figure hunched at a desk, a man. His back was to her. He scribbled something into a thick book, the quill in his hand moving with desperate energy. His clothes were old, not ancient, but not modern, threadbare sleeves, ink-stained cuffs. Claire took a step inside. The man paused. He didn't turn. He simply said, "You're early." Her voice was small. "Who are you?" "I don't matter anymore," he said without turning. "They took my name first, said I wouldn't need it." "Where is this? Memory," he said. "But not yours. You're walking through mine." "Why?" "Because the house shows you what it wants you to understand." He turned slowly now, revealing a gaunt face lined with black veins that pulsed beneath translucent skin. His eyes were clouded but sharp. "I was a watcher too," she shivered. "How long have you been here?" He tilted his head as if surprised by the question. "Time isn't the same. I still remember snow, but I also remember when there were no names for days. The house, it uses you, feeds on your attention. The more you see, the more it remembers. That's why it keeps us." "But I'm not part of it," Claire said quickly. "I don't want to be." He smiled sadly. "They never do. But the house finds gaps. People who've seen what shouldn't be seen. People with the wrong memories in the right bodies. That's how it begins." Claire took another step forward. "Can I leave?" "Eventually, if it lets you." "It watches." She looked at the book in front of him. Dozens of names, some crossed out, others still fresh, pages filled with frantic handwriting, symbols she recognized from the hallway. One name stood out, Claire Ellen Vale. Her heart dropped. "You wrote my name." "I only record what I'm told," the man said. "I'm not the archivist. I'm just the echo. My job is to remember what's already been forgotten." She ran her fingers over the ink. It was warm. "They're coming now." She froze. "Who?" He pointed toward the window. Claire turned, and the sky outside had gone black. Not nighttime, not shadow. Absence. Figures rose from the wheat, tall, stretched, limbs too long, faces smooth like wax. They didn't walk. They glided, parting the wheat with whispers. "They're not alive," the man whispered behind her. "They're the memory of pain. They're the ones who watched before us and failed." Claire turned to run, but the door was gone. Only stone walls now. No exit. She faced the man. "Help me." "I'm only a memory," he said gently. "You'll have to wake yourself." The walls began to dissolve. The floor vanished. And Claire felt her body pulled backward, upward, through space that wasn't real, through screams that weren't hers, until she gasped awake, back in the red room, alone, again. Her skin was clammy. Her limbs trembled with the aftershock of a dream that hadn't been a dream. She stared at her palm, the word Adeline carved delicately in the flesh. Not deep, but precise, as though etched with intent, not violence. It hadn't been there before. She pressed her other thumb into it. It burned slightly, like ink branded into nerves. The name meant nothing to her, and yet it ached in her throat like something she had once shouted. She stood on weak legs and looked around. The velvet chair was gone. The book was gone. The red light now flickered from a single gas lamp in the ceiling, casting slow-moving shadows across the floor. There was still no visible door, but one of the walls now bore a thin vertical seam, the shape of a mirror, tall and narrow, framed in warped brass. She hadn't noticed it before. It hadn't been there. She walked toward it. The glass shimmered as she approached, not reflecting her cleanly, but delaying her cleanly, but delaying her cleanly, but delaying her reflection. When she tilted her head, the reflection followed, but a moment too late. Then it caught up and began to move on its own. Claire stopped. Her reflection smiled. She didn't. The version in the mirror looked like her. Same green-flecked eyes, same uneven braid, same freckled nose, but older, worn. The eyes had seen more. The mouth held something between pain and apology. The mirrored Claire pressed a hand to the inside of the glass. Claire did the same to the inside of the glass. Claire did the same. and then the glass melted beneath her fingers, rippling like water. The reflection pulled her hand inward, and she couldn't stop it. The room around her blinked away, and she was inside the mirror. The world on the other side was not reversed, not like a reflection. It was a hallway, but cleaner, sharper, lit by candlelight that never flickered. The walls were carved with writing in a language Claire couldn't read, but could almost understand. Each word felt like a breath on the back of her neck. And further down the corridor, the mirrored Claire stood waiting. She wasn't smiling anymore. "You shouldn't be here yet," she said softly. Claire stepped forward. "Who are you?" "You," the reflection replied. "Oh, a little further ahead, a little more broken." "It never is. I don't believe that. You will." They stood face to face now. "I don't become you," Claire said. The reflection tilted her head. "Not exactly, but pieces of me are inside you. Pieces of all of us. That's how the house works. It remembers through us. It builds through us." Claire frowned. "The others, the watchers, they're still here, aren't they? All of them." "Some are dreaming their own reflections, even now." The mirrored Claire raised her hand again, this time not in invitation but in warning. "Don't open the fourth door." "What fourth door? You'll know it when you see it." Then she stepped backward, fading into the shadows. Claire turned and found herself back in the red room, the mirror now just a wall again, seamless and blank. Only now she wasn't alone. A new voice spoke behind her, familiar, masculine, soft. "Claire," it said. "It's me." She turned and saw someone she hadn't seen in 5 years, Lucas Vale, her older brother, dead. Lucas stood exactly as Claire remembered him. Same tousled brown hair, same crooked smile, same faded denim jacket, the one he used to wear even in summer, claiming it held his thoughts together. But that was impossible. He had died 5 years ago. Drowned in the lake near their grandparents' cottage. She'd seen them pull his body from the water, seen the pale blue lips, the gaping stillness. Yet here he was. "Lucas," she whispered, almost afraid to say it. He smiled softly. "Hey, Bug." Her breath caught in her throat. He hadn't called her that since she was 10. Claire backed away instinctively, one hand finding the wall. This isn't real. You're not." "I know what you think," Lucas said gently. "That I'm a trick. That I'm just another shadow." "Maybe I am." "Then why are you talking to me?" she asked. "Because you need to know the truth. And I need to remember." Claire stared at him. "You don't remember, only parts." His smile faded. "The house took the rest. That's how it works. It pulls pieces of us out, names, memories, choices, and it builds itself from what we forget." He walked slowly around the room, fingers trailing across the walls like he was reading Braille in reverse. "I think I came before you. I don't know how many times. I don't know which version of me this is. But I remember the lake, I remember the cold, and I remember the first time I saw him." "Who?" she asked. Lucas stopped, the one behind the fourth door. Claire's heart clenched. "The girl in the mirror," she said. "She warned me." "Then she's still trying to help," Lucas said. "That's good." He stepped close now, so close she could see the little scar above his. Losho could see the little scar above his left eyebrow, the one he got from falling off his bike at 8. "You're not dead," Claire said quietly. "You're here. Maybe we both are. Maybe this is a dream, or another place. But you can't be dead." Lucas looked at her sadly. "Claire, you saw them pull me out of the lake. I was cold. I wasn't breathing. I never came back." Tears welled up in her eyes. "But I didn't remember the house then." "I didn't remember the house then. I didn't know this place," she said. Lucas shook his head. "That's what the house does. It connects to the forgotten places, the cracks in time, the memories you almost let go of." She stared at him. "Why me?" "Because you saw something," he said, "when we were little, before I died. You don't remember it, but you followed me once, into the woods behind the lake." Claire blinked. She had a memory, something hazy, autumn leaves, a dark mouth of trees, Lucas ahead of her saying something she couldn't hear. You wandered into something she couldn't hear. And the house marked you. She took a step back. This isn't fair. Lucas smiled, sad and warm. No, it never is. Then his eyes darkened. You need to leave soon. I can't. There's no door. There will be, but not here. You have to go deeper. I don't want to go deeper. You have to, he said, before the house decides to keep you. The red light dimmed. Shadows spilled across the floor like ink bleeding into cloth. Lucas's edges began to blur like he was being pulled backward into fog. Lucas, I'll find you again, he said, if I can. But if you see him, who? Lucas's voice became distant, distorted. Don't look into his eyes. And then he was gone. The walls groaned. The floor split open at her feet. And Claire fell again, not down, but through, like water spiraling into a drain. This time she didn't land. She arrived in a corridor of stone, long, wet, lined with doors all identical, except the fourth. It was breathing. The corridor stretched out in perfect symmetry, every door identical in size, shape, even in the slow drip of water echoing from somewhere unseen. The stone walls pulsed faintly with dampness. It smelled like the inside of a sealed tomb, cold stone, old rot, and something sweeter like mildew and rusted iron. But the fourth door wasn't like the others. It pulsed, not with light, but with breath. Claire stood in front of it now, close enough to feel the air rising and falling around its edges, like a heartbeat just below the surface of a wound. She raised her hand. She didn't want to touch it. Her brother's voice echoed in her skull. Don't look into his eyes. But the house was silent, watching, waiting. She stepped back, turned to the third door. Her hand brushed the handle. It was warm. Dust suspended like smoke. At the center, a crib. Claire's breath caught. She walked in slowly. The crib was old, black wood, carved with tiny eyes along the frame. Inside, a bundle of blankets, silent. Still, she leaned over the edge. Empty. No child, no body, just a small, curled scrap of paper. She unfolded it. In charcoal, a word. Adalyn, not Adeline. What's happening to me? The room answered with a creak, not the door, but the walls. They bowed inward as though exhaling. And behind her the candlelight shifted, casting a new shadow, a figure, small, crawling. She turned, and the door slammed shut. She lunged at it, pounded with her fists. Nothing. Then the whisper came. You left me here. Claire spun. The crib was overturned. The figure was upright now, maybe 4 feet tall, thin limbs wrapped in soaked linen, well-reeking. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It had no face, only a long vertical mouth stitched closed. Claire screamed. The figure began to crawl toward her, dragging itself, bones cracking with each motion. She backed into the corner. Her mind screamed, wake up, but her body knew better. She was awake. The figure stopped inches from her face. Then it began to unravel, not explode, not rot, unravel like yarn. Skin peeling in threads, iced times, like yarn. Skin peeling in threads. All shapes, all sizes. Each one watching. The walls screamed, and then the room collapsed inward like a crushed lung. Darkness swallowed her. She woke in front of the fourth door again, still closed, still breathing. But now her legs were weak, her mouth was dry. She whispered, "Why am I here?" The house whispered back, "Because you lied." "What lie?" "You promised you would stay." Claire's chest tightened. We backed away. "You promised you would stay." Claire's chest tightened. She backed away, but the corridor had changed. Wah! Moan, her legs were weak. Well, no, her legs were weak. But now her legs were weak. No. Only the fourth remained. There was no escape now. She touched the handle. It was cold, dead cold. She closed her eyes. Lucas's voice, "Don't look into his eyes." But she opened the door. The door swung open with the slow weight of a dream. No creak, no wind, just a cold breath that pulled her inward. Claire stood at the threshold, staring into a room that defied shape. It wasn't a chamber, not really. There were walls, but they moved, shifted, warped. Every time her eyes tried to focus, the angles changed. The space pulsed like a wound trying to heal around something rotten, and at the center, a chair, wooden, ancient, facing away from her. A figure sat in it, still, silent, not bound, not restrained, but still. Claire took one step inside, then another. The door closed behind her without sound. It was freezing, not cold like winter, cold like absence, the kind that makes your bones feel transparent. She tried to speak, but no words came. The figure spoke first. Its voice wasn't loud, it didn't echo, but it filled the room. "You came late." Claire's knees weakened. She swallowed. "Who are you?" A pause. "I am what remains when the story ends," the voice said. "I am the empty page." The silence after the last word. She couldn't see his face. The back of his head was wrong, too smooth, too round, as though carved from wax. You've seen pieces, shadows, echoes, but this is not your first time, Claire. This is only the first time you've chosen to remember. Claire trembled. "I've never been here before." "Yes, you have, in different shapes, with different names." He turned his head slightly. "Do you remember the lake?" She froze. "I remember Lucas." "I don't mean him." "I don't mean him." Her throat tightened. "I mean what you saw, in the trees, what you told no one." Something breathing just beyond the clearing. The sense that someone was watching her from inside her own skin. She said nothing. The figure stood. He was impossibly tall, but not unnatural, not monstrous. He looked almost human, clothes draped over him like curtains of shadow. His hands were bare, long-fingered, gray, but his face, there was none. Where eyes should have been mirrors, two round, silver mirrors, each reflecting only her. Her body, her fear, her secrets. She gasped and looked away, but it was too late. A wave rushed through her. Not water, not sound, memory, sudden, sharp, and complete. She saw herself, younger, maybe 6, standing in the woods. Lucas was nearby, skipping stones on the lake. She had wandered into the clearing alone. In the circle of stones, a mirror lay on the ground. She picked it up, and something inside smiled at her. "Come back when you're ready." Claire reeled, nearly collapsing. The figure didn't move. "You promised," it said. "No," she whispered. "You said you'd return. You gave me a name, not yours, hers." Claire's hand throbbed. She looked at her palm. The name was gone. Only a mirror remained, a perfect circle etched into her skin. "You belong here," the voice said. "That is the nature of the Watcher. You look, you listen, you remember. And when the others forget, you remember. And when the others forget, you remain." Tears streamed down her face. "I never asked for this. You were chosen the moment you looked." He stepped closer. She backed away until her spine hit the shifting wall. "Please," she whispered. "I want to go home. There is no home, only forgetting." He raised one hand. A mirror bloomed behind him, huge, circular, and smooth as oil. In its reflection, Claire didn't see the room. She saw herself, in her bed, eyes open, mouth moving, but no sound. Trapped, the figure spoke one last time. "If you walk through, you'll forget again, until the house remembers you and calls you back." She stared into the mirror, then at the faceless man. "I want to go." He didn't nod, he didn't speak. He simply stepped aside. Claire walked toward the mirror and stepped through. Claire awoke to the sound of birdsong. Warm light spilled across her bedsheets, her ceiling, her desk with the sketches, the cracked open window letting in the scent of grass and honeysuckle, her room, her world, chairs. But she didn't move. For several long minutes, she just lay there staring at the ceiling, unmoving, unsure if she was breathing or pretending to breathe. Was it over? She sat up slowly. The room was exactly as she had left it before visiting the watching house. Same clothes on the floor, same cup of water on the nightstand, same drawing on the wall, the willow tree by the lake. Her fingers brushed her palm instinctively. Smooth. No mark, no mark. Maybe her brain, long flooded with memories of Lucas, had twisted some half-forgotten childhood trauma into a hallucination. Maybe. She turned toward the mirror above her dresser and froze. Her reflection blinked a second too late. Claire blinked again. Her reflection followed, but hesitantly, like it wasn't sure what came next. Her breath caught. She leaned forward. The face in the mirror was hers. Freckles, pale eyes, a faint line where she used to bite her lip too much. But it wasn't her. Her shoulders slumped as realization returned, sickening and slow. She was back, but not completely. Something had crossed with her, or worse, instead of her. She stood and walked slowly to the mirror. Her reflection stood still. Claire reached forward. So did the reflection, but an instant too late, always a beat behind, like it was watching her. Not mimicking, not mirroring, observing. She leaned in. "Who are you?" The reflection didn't respond, but her lips moved, not even quite matching the words. Then, just as Claire began to pull back, the reflection tilted its head and grinned. Not her grin, wider, too wide, her body seized with cold panic. She stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The mirror remained unchanged now, normal. Her reflection stared back neutrally, as though nothing had happened. She ran to the bathroom, flipped the switch. Same delay. Every mirror in the house, off just a fraction. She checked her hands. Come? She stumbled backward. But something else was missing. She pulled out an old photo album from beneath her bed, thumbed quickly through the pages. Family trips, her mother's birthday, Lucas at the lake. Then nothing. The photos grew hazy, faded, faces blurred. Some were missing entirely, just empty clothes, a landscape with no people, a picnic table with no one sitting at it. Her name was still written under some of them. Claire, in her mother's cursive, Claire, in her mother's cursive. But on one page, beneath a photo of her and Lucas by the willow tree, a different name had been scrawled in ink, far darker and newer than the others. Adeline. Her throat tightened. No. She grabbed a pen and scratched it out, wrote Claire again. When she blinked, it had changed back. Adeline. The phone rang downstairs. She jumped. Her legs carried her out of her room, down the hallway, trembling with every step. Like it was staged. Like it was hers, but only mostly. She picked up the phone. "Hello?" Her mother's voice answered, distant, distracted. "Adeline, hey, are you still coming to lunch with your aunt today?" Claire gripped the receiver tightly. "Mom?" A pause. "Yes," Claire whispered. "It's me, Claire." Silence on the line. Then, "Don't be silly, sweetie." Click. The line went dead. Claire stared at the receiver in her hand. Then, "Don't be silly, sweetie." Click. The line went dead. Claire stared at the receiver in her hand. And again. Grinning. Always watching. Claire didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Every time she blinked for too long, the world shifted. Just a hair, just enough to make her stomach turn. The trees outside her window rustled to a rhythm that didn't match the wind. The shadows in her room took too long to settle. And the mirrors? She had covered them all. Every single one. But the feeling of being watched hadn't gone away. It was inside her now. She sat on the edge of her bed at 3011 a.m., clutching an old cassette recorder she'd found in the attic. It had once belonged to Lucas. She didn't know why she'd picked it up. Maybe because it felt real, heavy, solid, something untouched by whatever was happening. She pressed record. "My name is Claire Ellen Vale," she said softly, as if speaking louder might invite correction. "I live at 43 Alder Creek Road. I was born in..." She stopped. She couldn't remember her birth date. She knew it was October. The 17th? No, the 18th. It felt like both and neither. She pulled open her drawer, rifling through old-school IDs, notes, letters. Everything listed a different birthday: October 14, October teen, Septing, 123. One even read November. Her hands shook. "This is wrong," she whispered into the recorder. "This is all wrong." She played it back. "Static, only static. Lovong." She played it back. "Static, only static. No voice, no induzantuade. Homan, no idri 14, October sealan, Okrad is Addis way. "My name is Claire. I am not Adeline." Clay. Static. She dropped the recorder. It didn't shatter. It just stopped existing. She stared at the floor where it had been, empty, no fragments, no sound, as if it had never been there. The air in the room thickened. She stood, heart racing, and turned on her desk lamp. The bulb flickered, not with light, but with images. For one split second, across the white shade, the house. The white shade, the house. The veal house. The watching house. Blackened roof. Look, a girl on the porch. She wasn't alone. There were shapes behind the glass. Faces. Watching. Then the lamp went dark. She turned on her phone. The screen lit up for half a second, then went black, not dead, just off. It wouldn't respond. She held the power button. The Apple logo appeared. But instead of the word iPhone, it read, Adeline's device. She dropped it like a hot coal. By morning, she was trembling. Adeline? The doorknob turned. Claire grabbed it from the other side, locking it just before it opened. Mom, she said through the door, her voice trembling. What's my name? A pause. I just told you, sweetie. It's... Say it, Claire said. Please. Another pause. Adeline, her mother said gently. Claire backed away from the door. No, she whispered. That's not me. She needed proof. Someone had to remember. She slipped out the back of the house and headed into town. Everything looked the same, perfectly so. The bakery, the corner library, the crooked tree outside the high school, not just familiar, exact, like someone had rebuilt them from memory. That's what it felt like now. The world was a replica of her memories, but missing soul. She walked into the coffee shop where she used to work weekends. The same barista, Eli, stood behind the counter, humming tunelessly. He looked up and smiled. Do you remember me? He blinked, confused. Yeah, of course, you were in here just last week. No, she stepped forward. I mean, really remember me. My name, my real name. He laughed softly. That is your name. No, it's not. I'm Claire. Claire Vale. You used to tease me about burning the muffins. Claire? He repeated, frowning. I don't think I've ever met anyone named Claire. Her sank. Behind Eli, a small convex mirror reflected the shop, except in the mirror she wasn't alone. Behind her, something tall and dark loomed just outside the shop's window, watching. Claire didn't turn around. She couldn't. She kept her eyes locked on Eli, who still smiled, pleasantly unaware, and backed slowly toward the door of the cafe. But the mirror behind him showed the figure outside, watching through the glass. It stood impossibly still, like a coat rack made of shadow and bone. She reached the door, pushed it open, stepped out into the street. Sunlight, wind, the chirp of a bicycle bell. Normal, but her heart was pounding. She turned her head, slowly, toward the window where the figure had been. Gone, no one there, no shadow, no trace, just her reflection in the glass, and behind her reflection, another one. A second Claire, mouth open in silent scream. She whirled around, but no one stood behind her. Only an empty sidewalk and a street that stretched on too far, too straight. The buildings seemed duplicated, as if someone had copy-pasted the same row of houses 5 times in a row. She walked, faster now, past the bookstore, past the old post office, and again the bookstore. The same pigeon pecked at the same crust on the same sidewalk crack. She turned a corner, and again the bookstore. Same door, slightly ajar. Same flyer hanging half-ripped on the window. Missing cat. Churro. Reward. Her stomach churned. She turned on her heel and sprinted. No destination, just away. Her feet pounded pavement. Her lungs burned. She turned another corner and stopped. The watching house stood at the end of the street. Whole, clean, restored. Its windows gleamed. Curtains fluttered. A white fence framed a manicured lawn. It looked new. Claire stepped forward. A mailman walked past her, whistling. He didn't even glance at the house. Excuse me, she called. Do you see that house? She pointed. He looked, then frowned slightly. Which one? That one. The white one, right there. He followed her finger again, smiled again, but a little too quickly. Nice place, he said flatly. Been here for years. He turned, walked away. No footprints in the dirt. Just gone. Claire's legs moved without permission. Toward the gate. Up the path. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Please, tell me this is the way out." She opened the door. Inside was not the house. Inside was the cafe. Eli stood at the counter, back turned, humming. Claire stood just outside the door. Again, she backed away, looked up at the building. Still the house. She looked again. Now the bakery. She blinked. Now the post office. The world glitched, like an old VHS skiving frames. Her breath clouded in the summer air. Wreath clouded in the summer air. A voice spoke behind her. "You're wearing thin." She spun. The girl in white stood just beyond the curb, hair thick and still, dress gently swaying. "You're not built for this much slipping," she said. "Reality doesn't like to be worn from the inside out." "What's happening to me?" Claire asked. "Why can't I stay anywhere?" "You're not supposed to," the girl said. "You chose to remember." That opened the gate. Now the world's trying to fold you back in. Ow. "I don't belong here." "No," the girl said softly. "You belong in between." She pointed to the ground. A crack split the sidewalk, hair thin but endless, a jagged black seam stretching across the road. Claire whispered, "What's down there?" "Your truth," the girl replied. "But it's a long way down." Then the girl smiled, tilted her head. "You should hurry." "Why?" The girl's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Because she's almost finished stitching herself in." "Why?" She just pointed to the window of the bakery. Claire turned and saw herself inside, serving customers, laughing, perfectly settled in her skin. The new Adeline, or Claire, or both. Claire stared through the bakery window, unable to breathe. The girl behind the counter, the one with her face, was laughing. Light danced across her freckled cheeks. She wore Claire's denim jacket, slightly oversized, the cuffs frayed the same way from years of nervous fiddling. The new Adeline, or Claire. She handed a muffin to a customer, Eli, who leaned in and said something that made her smile. The way her head tilted, the subtle way her fingers brushed his, Claire recognized it all, because it was hers. But the girl inside didn't glance at the window, didn't shiver, didn't see her. Claire stepped back. A truck rumbled by, then flickered like an image caught between frames. The entire world wavered. The color bled. The sidewalk stretched too long, then snapped between frames. The entire world wavered. The color bled. For a heartbeat, she saw nothing but gray static and a row of houses with no doors, just black holes where thresholds should be. The girl in white was gone. Claire turned in a slow circle, suddenly aware of how silent the town had become. No birds, no cars, no footsteps. The only sound was a low hum, like the static between TV channels turned down low, the vibration of a signal she wasn't supposed to hear. She pressed her palms to her ears, but it grew louder and supposed to hear. She pressed her palms to her ears, but Ray stumbled. Her vision fractured into a spider web of images. A child's hand reaching for her from a dark crib, the spiral staircase with no end, only mirrors. Lucas's body floating face down, lips blue with open eyes, a reflection smiling with her mouth, but someone else's teeth. The name Adeline whispered in a dozen different voices, some hers, some not, and then silence again. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer on the street. She was in a classroom, not a memory, a copy. Students filled the desks, every one of them familiar. Every one of them someone Claire had known, but they looked through her like she was glass. On the chalkboard, a sentence repeated again and again in flawless cursive. "A name is a door. A name is a door. A name is a door." Every page was filled with her handwriting, but none of the entries were hers. Today I wore her face. She didn't notice. I walked through her memories like a museum. He said my name today. It didn't feel right. It felt borrowed. The girl in white was here again. She asked if I was happy. I said yes, but I don't know who I was answering as. Claire is fading. I can feel it. Soon I won't remember she wasn't always me. Claire slammed the notebook shut, her breath ragged. The students turned toward her in perfect unison. Their eyes, all mirrors. The room exploded in white light. She awoke in the woods. Same rust-colored sky. Same wheat field swaying with breath, not wind. But this time, the cottage was burning. Black smoke poured from the windows. Ash swirled around her like snow. The well had collapsed into a pit, deep, jagged, wet with red. She stumbled forward, coughing, crying. Inside, in the center of the inferno, the figure from the fourth door stood untouched by the flames, faceless, eyeless, still. He didn't speak. He only raised one long finger and pointed to her chest. Claire looked down. A mirror had begun to form in her sternum, embedded in the skin, small and round, like a seed blooming. In the glass, her reflection, smiling, just like the girl in the bakery. But Claire wasn't smiling. She fell to her knees and screamed. The cottage collapsed around her. When she awoke, she was on her bed again. Morning light, birdsong, a knock at the door, her mother's voice. "Adeline? Honey?" Claire turned her head, saw her own reflection in the mirror. It smiled, and this time she smiled back, without meaning to, without control. And in her mind, like a whisper behind a closed door, the house said, "You are becoming." She stood there, still and watching, the way prey stands when it knows the predator has already seen it. The reflection grinned wider, her own mouth twisting into something foreign. And in that moment, something inside her snapped. A thread pulled too tight, memory pulling back harder than the mirror could absorb. She staggered away from the dresser, gripping the edge of her bed to keep from falling. Her heart pounded, and behind her eyes, something moved, like fingers turning the pages of her mind. She couldn't trust her face. She couldn't trust her reflection. But she could still trust what hurt. Claire forced herself to her knees and reached under the bed, groping past shoeboxes and forgotten notebooks until her fingers brushed something rough, leather, frayed, warm from memory. It was Lucas's journal. She hadn't opened it in years. She'd stolen it from the hospital after he died. Too afraid to read it, too guilty to throw it away. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it out. Inside were drawings, maps, notes, not about school or friends or teenage drama, but about dreams, places that didn't exist, names he claimed he'd heard before he could speak them, eyes watching him in the water. One page was filled with a sketch of the watching house, detailed in impossible clarity. Windows cracked just as she remembered, the weather vanes spinning even when the air was still. "I think there's a door under the lake," one entry read. "When I dream, I see it open. And sometimes Claire is on the other side, not always her face, but her. Wait, her breath caught. He had seen it too. The house, the pull, here. The house, the pull, here. Maybe he had fought too. Maybe the lake had been his way of anchoring himself in the real world, and maybe it had swallowed him for trying. She flipped to the last page. It was blank. No, not blank. Faint ink had begun to appear, scrawled in a handwriting not quite his, not quite hers. "Remember the willow tree." A jolt ran down her spine. The willow. It was where she and Lucas used to meet when things were bad, when their parents fought, when their parents fought, when their parents fought, when the world felt too loud. They had carved something into its trunk. She hadn't seen it in years. Her legs moved before thought could catch up. She left the house in silence. The morning air felt thinner now, like it was stretched over hollow spaces. The sky had no clouds, only a smooth, unbroken blue, like a lid waiting to be closed. The town was too still. As she passed the bakery, Adeline stood at the window, folding napkins into careful triangles. But her lips moved. Claire couldn't hear her voice, but she could read it plainly. "You're too late." She kept walking, through the center of town. Past the school that seemed smaller now. Toward the lake. The woods were thicker than she remembered, the trees older somehow, their trunks gnarled like twisted bone. But the willow still stood, just beyond the edge of the water. Its branches swayed gently, even though the air was dead calm. And there it was. On the trunk, beneath the moss, C+L, 2 letters carved deep, weathered by time but still intact. She pressed her fingers to the groove. 1,000 moments rushed back, giggles in the grass, skipping stones, Lucas teaching her how to whistle with a blade of grass. And then that one night, the one she had forced herself to forget, when she'd wandered too close to the clearing alone and something had whispered her name like it had always known her. Claire closed her eyes. "I'm Claire," she whispered. "I'm not Adeline. I'm not a reflection. I'm not a vessel. I'm not a name waiting to be filled." She drew her thumbnail across the carving until her skin split, just enough to sting. The blood smeared into the bark, bright and real. I remember, she said louder now. You can't take that from me. The water parted at its center, not like it was opening, but like it was inviting. A path. Beneath the lake bed, something glowed faintly. A door, just as Lucas had written, and Claire understood. If she wanted to break the loop, to tear the rot out at its root, she couldn't escape the house. She had to go deeper, where it hid, where it fed. She stood and wiped the blood from her hand. And then, without hesitation, she stood and wiped the blood from her hand. Claire didn't feel the cold as she stepped into the lake. Only silence. A silence so deep it muffled even her thoughts. The water enveloped her like breath held too long. For a moment she panicked, expecting the chill to hit, for her lungs to scream for air, but none of that came. Her body obeyed a different rhythm now, one that didn't belong to the world she knew. The surface didn't ripple as she sank, only folded itself closed above her, sealing her away like a page turned in a book no one remembered reading. The deeper she went, the more her thoughts stretched thin, unraveling like threads tugged by unseen fingers. What began as memory grew soft and blurred, and what had once been fear melted into a strange, ancient calm. Below the surface, light vanished quickly. It wasn't dark, not at first, but gray, as if color had forgotten this part of the world. Strange shapes moved along the periphery of her vision, organic and slow, not threatening but not welcoming either. Tendrils of weed brushed past her arms like old fingers. The deeper she went, the more the lake changed. Rock gave way to stone bricks. Natural silt became paved floor. And then, impossibly, walls, rising up around her as though the lake bed had grown a corridor just for her. She realized slowly that she was no longer swimming. She was walking. There was no resistance, no pressure, no weight. Just forward movement, as if the lake itself had given her back to gravity. The corridor twisted. Lights flickered on. Not bulbs, but glowing symbols carved into the stone. Her footsteps echoed, faint but steady, the only true sound in this forgotten place. She ran her fingers along the markings on the walls, and each one pulsed slightly beneath her touch, like nerves remembering pain. Some looked like words, some like eyes, others like doorways to a language older than speech. And still she continued. Something waited at the end. She didn't know what it was, but she knew it had been waiting a long time. Not just for her, but for someone like her. A host, a vessel, a resistor, a resistor. At last, the corridor opened into a chamber. It was vast, circular, endless, though the walls stood visible. The floor beneath her feet was a mosaic, but not of stone or tile. Eyes, hundreds, thousands of eyes, painted, carved, sculpted, pressed into the floor like fossils. All were shut. The feeling of being watched returned not as a presence but as a certainty, like something just behind her, just beyond what she could name. The walls themselves were mirrors, not reflective but absorptive, swallowing light and giving back only depth. They didn't show her face. They showed movement, histories, failures, the places where others had stood before her and been undone. At the center stood a plinth, simple, stone. Upon it lay a book, bound in pale, unmarked leather. Claire approached with the same hesitation one might have standing on the edge of a cliff, not because the drop was uncertain, but because part of her wanted to fall. As if she were the last breath in a room full of sealed mouths. Her hand touched the book. It opened, not with pages turning, but with pages rising. They fanned around her in the air, floating, suspended like the wings of a massive bird caught in frozen flight. Each one flickered with images, not words but memories, lives, people she had never known and yet recognized with perfect, painful clarity. A boy screaming as he disappeared behind a mirror. A woman trapped inside her own name, speaking backwards into a cracked phone. A man walking into a field of wheat that never ended. Over and over, the same moment, a choice not made, a door not closed, a version of the self left behind. And then the book showed her Adeline. The girl in white, now seated at a dinner table across from Claire's mother, laughing, pouring tea, wearing Claire's sweater, stealing her gestures, flipping through a photo album that no longer bore Claire's face. Behind them, in the shadowed hallway, Claire watched from the mirror, voiceless, fading, hands pressed against glass that bent but never broke. She reached toward the page. The moment her fingers touched the image, the book snapped shut. The room shook, the plinth cracked, the walls pulsed with rising light. The walls pulsed with rising light. Beneath her feet, the eyes began to open, one by one, slowly, painfully. Each revealed not a pupil, but a memory. Some hers, some stolen. She saw Lucas at the lake, sinking. She saw herself crawling from the house, bones out of place. She saw the real Adeline, screaming silently in a school hallway as no one recognized her. Each opened eye stared into her soul, not with judgment, but remembrance. Then a voice, not spoken aloud, not from the room, from the book. You are not the first to fight, but you may be the first to bleed willingly. Claire's chest constricted. You have been fractured, the voice continued. You are not whole, but your name is your anchor. Speak it, carve it, claim it. The mirror walls reflected nothing now, only pulsing white. The chamber began to distort, folding in on itself. Claire screamed, I am Claire Ellen Vale. Her voice reverberated, but the world did not echo. So she did it again, louder, again, and then she bit her lip until blood welled and dragged her finger across the plinth, drawing the name letter by letter. Was carved, the room convulsed. The eyes blinked. A roar rose not from below, but from within the walls themselves. The howling of a house that had been fed lies for too long, choking now on truth. Then everything shattered. Claire awoke on the shore of the lake, soaked and coughing. The sun was rising. She was alone. She reached for her palm. The mirror was gone. In its place, a scar, thin, faint, but shaped unmistakably like a C. And somewhere, far off in the woods behind her, the house groaned, but did not call her name. Claire did not feel relief upon waking at the shore of the lake. The sun might have been rising, the water might have loosened its grip, but the world around her was not the one she had left behind. There was no song in the wind, no chirping from trees, no sound but her own breath and the slow, measured beat of something far deeper beneath the surface. Even the light looked strange, washed out as though filtered through memory rather than morning. The scar in her palm, shaped like a C, burned faintly as she stood. It wasn't pain, it was proof. She walked, barefoot and soaked, through the tree line, each step pulling her further into a landscape that remembered her differently than she remembered it. The air was thick with a scent that defied time, both fresh and decayed, like blooming lilac buried in soil. The forest around her bent in ways that trees shouldn't. Trunks leaned toward her slightly, almost conspiratorially, and branches twisted not toward the sky, but toward the earth, as if listening to secrets whispered in the roots. With every step it became clearer. She had not escaped the house. She had stepped through it. The entrance revealed itself not as a doorway, but as a collapse. A spiral of stairs sunk beneath the base of a hollow tree, so ancient its bark resembled petrified bone. Claire descended without hesitation. The light above dimmed with each step, replaced not with darkness, but with a soft, silvery glow that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The stairwell narrowed. The air grew warmer. She could hear the groaning breath of the wood above, as if the tree were remembering something painful. She touched the wall. It pulsed. At first, Claire thought the chambers were abandoned, but soon she began to notice movement. Not people, not exactly, but outlines, impressions. Living silhouettes burned into air, walking old paths over and over again, unaware they were being watched. They shimmered like film reels caught between frames, their mouths moving silently in loops. She stopped in front of one that looked familiar. A child, young, hair tangled from wind, was sitting beneath a willow tree staring at the lake. Behind her, a shadow watched. Behind the shimmer, Claire saw herself, no older than 8, sitting in the back seat of a car, crying. Her father was in the front, silent, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. Her mother wasn't there. The image flickered, shifted, and replayed, over and over. She couldn't remember this exact day, but the emotions hit like a slap. She wanted to touch the image, comfort the child, but something told her not to. She was not here to interfere. She was here to understand. The archive began to change the deeper she went. The walls were no longer parchment and wood, but bone and glass. Each panel showed memories that weren't hers, a soldier screaming into a phone that had no line, a girl whispering secrets into a catatonic mother's ear, a teacher drawing a door on a chalkboard until the chalk bled red. These weren't stories, they were fragments, ruptured timelines, moments so sharp they cut into her breath. But Claire kept going. She had to find her center. She had to remember something more ancient than herself. She turned a corner and found a mirror, not hanging, not mounted, growing out of the wall like a tumor. It reflected nothing at first, just colorless light. Then, slowly, an image began to form. Not Claire, not Adeline, a woman, old but ageless, seated in a high-backed chair carved from symbols Claire didn't recognize. The woman's eyes were black mirrors, and when her lips moved, no sound came, only meaning. Claire understood. The woman was the keeper, not of memories, but of roots, the starting point of identity itself. Without speaking, the woman extended a finger and pointed downward. The mirror stretched, deepening until Claire saw stairs beneath it. A new descent. A choice. Go back to the surface, accept that she could stitch her name back into her life and never question the lie, or go deeper where even memory dissolved. She stepped forward, where even memory dissolved. In third, she stepped forward. Her body passed through with no resistance, and suddenly she was underground again, deeper than she had ever been. There was no light now, only a faint pulse in the stone beneath her feet, like a heartbeat in sleep. Here, the architecture made no sense. Hallways looped into themselves. Doors opened onto other doors. Staircases climbed into the ceiling and continued on the other side. Everything was fluid. Everything was alive. The walls pulsed with memory, but not hers. These were raw early fragments, identities without form, intentions without names. At last, she entered a dome-shaped room filled with water. But the water was above her, held to the ceiling like an upside-down ocean. Shapes moved inside it, memories trapped in motion. A man trying to scream as he ran from a flaming hallway. A little girl spinning in a dress stained with ink. A woman writing her name over and over on the walls, only for it to disappear. Claire stared up at them until her neck ached, until her own name began to slip from her tongue. She dropped to her knees and whispered it, slowly, syllable by syllable, like a tether. From the floor rose a hand, not attached to any body, just a hand, pale and long-fingered, reaching upward from the stone. It didn't grab her, it waited, and she, trembling, took it. The moment they touched, the entire chamber collapsed. She was not in the archive anymore. She stood in a room shaped like a brain, pulsating, fibrous, alive. It was warm here, too warm. The walls were red and wet and seemed to whisper just beneath the surface. In front of her, suspended in liquid that defied gravity, was a book. But this one was not made of leather or paper. It was made of names, thousands of them, each letter twisting and alive, rearranging into different people depending on how she looked at it. She stepped closer. One name rose to the surface, Claire Vale. But it was empty. No past, no shape, only potential. She understood then the true shape of the house. It was not a place. It was an intelligence, a hunger, an organism that fed on who you thought you were. Names were only the first layer. Once you gave it your face, your memories, your choices, it could wear you like a suit. It could seed you back into the world with just enough accuracy that no one would notice. And you, the real you, would be absorbed, forgotten, filed away in the archive like an expired page. Unless you chose to be something it couldn't digest. She stepped forward. The book turned to ash in its tank. The liquid hissed and boiled away. The chamber trembled. The house had found her. It was waking. It was angry. She was ready. Claire ran, not through halls, but through versions of herself. Rooms filled with moments from her life, refracted and looped. Her third birthday party, but everyone's faces were blank. her first kiss, except she was kissing her own reflection. The day Lucas died, again and again, each time with a slightly different outcome, one where she pulled him back, one where she drowned too, one where no one was ever at the lake at all. The house was showing her its menu, its archive of outcomes. She was its project, its problem, its glitch. And then she reached the heart. Not metaphor, not symbol, the heart was real. Suspended in the center of a void was a massive beating organ as large as a cathedral, strung with wires made of hair and blood and memory. It pulsed with rhythm and hunger and thought. Screens and pages and names flickered across its surface with each beat. It was alive. It was the house. Claire reached into her mind and dragged forth everything she had fought to remember. Lucas laughing, her mother's perfume, the weight of her sketchbook in her lap, the first time she saw snow through a bus window. She called out the names of teachers, of friends, of pets long buried in the garden. She shouted her own name until it no longer echoed but answered. The heart screamed, its surface cracked. The wires snapped one by one, shrieking like violins caught in barbed wire. Memory bled from the veins in the form of light. The archive above her shook. Doors opened, pages fluttered out like feathers. Screams echoed through stone and dream alike. Claire kept going. She pressed her hand to the surface of the heart. It buckled, not in pain, in confusion. You remember too much, the voice said, not through air but blood. You were meant to forget. That's the difference, Claire whispered, pressing deeper. I chose to remember. I chose to remember. Light exploded in every direction. Not fire, not heat, but recognition. The kind of brilliance that comes only when truth is no longer deniable. Claire stood in the middle of it all, arms wide, feeling the wave pass through her. Every lie the house had swallowed was regurgitated. Every stolen name, every forgotten self spat back into the cosmos. Somewhere far above, the girl in white opened her eyes for the first time in years. Somewhere else, a boy awoke from a dream of drowning he hadn't known was his. The archive began to collapse, not with violence, but with relief. The walls folded inward like pages closing on a story that had finally reached its end. Claire walked through it, unharmed, untouched. The echoes no longer reached for her. They watched her now, not in hunger, but in awe. A watcher who did not watch. A watcher who did not watch. A watcher who acted. The path behind her crumbled, but she did not look back. She had become something the house had not expected. Not a mirror, not a memory, but a will. She emerged again beneath the lake, where the water parted for her like breath. She did not swim. She rose. The surface did not resist her. It delivered her. The sky had returned to its rightful blue. The trees no longer leaned in suspicion. The birds sang, not the song of forgetting, but of witness. When she reached the shore, the scar in her palm glowed briefly, then faded. It had told her story. It had anchored her. She was Claire Ellen Vale. But the world she returned to was not the one she left behind. Her town was quiet, still, not in emptiness, but in recognition. The bakery was closed. The school was shuttered. The mirror in her bedroom was cracked down the center, not broken, just used. And Adeline, gone, not erased, remembered differently. Her name no longer replaced Claire's in yearbooks or journals. She was not an imposter. She was a fragment. Its quote, she was closed or thragment, a defense mechanism of the house, an answer to Claire's questions before she could ask them. And now that Claire had found those answers herself, the need for Adeline had vanished. She walked into her home. Her mother embraced her with tears and asked where she had gone, and Claire smiled and said, I just had to remember. Her mother didn't understand. But in the quiet of her room, as she stared at the scar, Claire knew the house still existed, somewhere beyond mirrors, somewhere beneath names, and she had entered it and left. But not unchanged, not forgotten, never again forgotten. In the days that followed, Claire did not return to the lake. She didn't need to. Its silence had been replaced with memory, not mystery. But she felt the house in small places, her dreams no longer random but coiled with echoes, her name sometimes taking just a beat longer to reach her lips in the mirror. The town adjusted to her like a limb grown back. People waved again, though some had a flicker of something unreadable behind their eyes, as if a name they couldn't place whispered just behind Claire's. Sometimes at night, Claire would wake with the sensation that someone was knocking. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, but it was insistent. And though she no longer bore the mirror in her palm, she could feel it somewhere in her chest, pulsing like a watch wound too tightly. She would get up and walk through the dark house, touching photographs, old coats, chipped cups. She would say her name aloud in every room. Claire, Claire, Claire. The walls didn't reply. One evening, Claire sat by the fireplace, flipping through the ashes of an old sketchbook. The drawings were hers, but the captions weren't. Beneath a charcoal sketch of the lake, the caption read, "The day I returned, but never left." She had not written that. Not consciously, but her hand recognized the pressure of the graphite. She flipped another page. Names do not define us, but they trap us. The ones who remember are keys. Then came the letter, no stamp, no return address, just folded paper in her mailbox one gray morning. It read, "You broke the record. You walked into the center. You survived. We'd like to meet you." There was no signature. She knew better than to go. But of course she did. Some houses you walk into, some houses you become. And some houses are people, stitched from memory, sealed by belief. The meeting place was not a building, but a belief. The meeting place was not a building, but a vinge in a park. The man waiting for her looked ordinary, too ordinary, the kind of ordinary that only something carefully designed could achieve. He offered her tea. She declined. He offered her truth. She paused. "Why me?" she asked. "Why did it choose me?" He shook his head slowly. "It doesn't choose. It waits, and then it remembers through you, because you looked when others closed their eyes. And now what?" He smiled, not cruelly, not kindly. "Thorn, you act away. Now you choose. You can walk away, forget, Kriam. Or what? Or become the one who helps others remember." She said nothing. But that night, in her dreams, she walked through the house once more, and this time it did not lock its doors. Claire began writing things down again, not just to remember, but to map, to pin shadows to pages. She filled notebooks with fragments, dreams, conversations, doors that shouldn't be there. She kept a list of people who seemed different, Eli from the bakery, who now stuttered when seen different, Eli from the bakery, who now stuttered when saying her name. Portman, who used to teach chemistry, who now claimed she'd taught history instead. And then there were the gaps, buildings that changed color, rooms that echoed too long, reflections that wore different clothes. Each note was a thread, each thread a tether. One entry in her journal read, "Sometimes I think I'm the only real one left, but then I meet someone else who knows the rules, and I wonder, am I theirs or are they mine?" She didn't remember writing it, but she remember writing it, but she didn't remember writing. It was better to be haunted by questions than possessed by certainty. Every now and then, the scar on her palm itched. When she scratched at it too hard, she would bleed ink. Only once did she dip a pen into it. The things she wrote that day frightened her. Names that made mirrors vibrate. Symbols that felt like doors. Years passed. Or seemed to. Time didn't function around Claire the way it used to. Clocks still ticked. Calendars still turned. But certain days repeated. Conversations echoed at the wrong volume, and occasionally she'd find herself holding objects she hadn't touched in years, as though time reached backward and handed them to her in apology. She no longer asked why. She accepted it as part of the residue. That's what she called it now, the residue of being seen by the house. Being known, not as a monster, not as a threat, just as her. Sitting at her kitchen table, wearing her face, eating toast. "I never stopped being you," the reflection said before Claire could ask. "I just took the shift that hurt less." Claire sat across from her. No fear, no rage, just quiet. "You can have the name," the reflection offered. "You earned it." I never lost it, Claire replied. And with that, the reflection smiled and began to fade, not in pain, not as a threat and oath, and in pain, like a role no longer needed. Claire understood then that identity was not a single flame, but a room full of candles, some lit, some still waiting for air. The house had tried to extinguish her. She had relit herself, and now she could offer the match to others. She began to see the flickers in strangers, people walking with missing pieces, names stitched wrong, memories misaligned. And she would speak to them, not in riddles, not in fear, just in names. "What do you call yourself?" she would ask. And if they hesitated, she knew the door had opened. The house never returned, not as a building, not as a dream, but Claire knew it was there in forgotten rooms, in names whispered too quietly, in reflections that paused too long. It was not a villain, it was a boundary, and some people needed boundaries. Others, like Claire, needed doors, and so she became one, a walking doorway. She preached no gospel, but people found her, and when they did, they left with their name properly stitched to their shape. Eventually, she stopped aging. Not in the mythical way, she still changed, still grew, but the world stopped measuring her. No one asked how old she was. No one tracked her address. It was as if the name she had reclaimed made her exempt from certain forms of forgetting. She liked it that way. She did not need a past. She liked it that way. She did not need a past. She only needed a name. And so, when she finally returned to the lake, she didn't enter it. She placed her hand on the water and whispered, "Thank you." And the water whispered back, "Remember." Claire sometimes dreamed in alphabets. Whole languages flowed beneath her eyelids, some of them familiar, some of them purely shapes. She would wake with pages soaked in symbols she didn't remember writing. She kept them all. Some grew warm to the touch. Some bled. Some grew warm to the touch. Some bled. Once she burned one, and the smoke spelled out, "Remember nothing." She laughed. She remembered everything. One morning, a girl arrived at Claire's doorstep, young, afraid, eyes too old for her face. "I saw a mirror," she whispered. Claire simply nodded and opened the door. They sat in silence. The girl cried. Claire gave her a name, not one to keep, one to return to, a map to the self beneath. The girl left with a book in her hand and a scar on her palm. Claire never saw her again, but she felt the name settle into the world, new but ancient. It joined the archive, and so the archive grew, not in a house, not in a basement, but in the people who walked away from forgetting, each of them a page, each of them a door. Claire stopped fearing the house. She understood now. It wasn't evil. It wasn't even alive in the way people were. It wasn't even alive in the way people were. It was a system, a living library, a guardian of identity and myth, and like any guardian, it protected its contents. When those contents wandered too far, when names fractured, when selves bled, it stitched new stories to hold the seams together. She had been one of those stitches. So had Adeline. So had Lucas. The last reflection she ever saw smiled at her from a river's surface. It looked like a stranger. That pleased her. The house no longer knew her shape. She had rewritten it too many times. She had rewritten it too many times. She had walked through fire and glass and names until even the mirrors had to pause and think. She dipped her hands into the river, and her reflection bowed, not in fear, in respect. And when she finally disappeared, not died, not vanished, but dispersed, no one mourned her, because she left something behind in every person she helped remember. Her name became a seed, a glyph, a wake-up call whispered through cracked windows and dusty hallways. And somewhere, deep beneath a lake that no longer existed on any map, the heart of the house beat one final time, and slept, until someone else whispered, "Who am I?" The world had changed, but not enough. The lake had gone dry, but people still passed it on the way to markets and funerals. They called it a basin now, a hollow in the land that had once held water and secrets. Only the old spoke of the girl who vanished there and returned with a different walk, a different weight in her eyes. Claire Ellen Vale had become more than a myth, less than a memory. She was a rumor in the bloodlines of a town too proud to remember its sins. It was Adeline who came back first, not the same Adeline, not really. A different body, different voice, but the same eyes, hollow with purpose. She returned bearing parchment and seals, orders from a place no one could quite point to on a map. Reclamation, she called it, for the good of narrative integrity. They said she was a scholar, a registrar of stories, and she had been tasked with cataloging fractures. But Claire knew better. The house was not gone. It had changed strategy. It had put on robes and woven itself into law. She was older now, wiser. The fire that once burned for answers now simmered for strategy. Claire welcomed Adeline with tea, as though they were old friends. They weren't. They had never been. But they had been mirrors, and that was sometimes closer than kin. They spoke of memories like they were tools, sharpened, traded, sometimes buried for leverage. Claire did not fight with spells or mirrors anymore. She fought with names, and names in the right hands were sharper than any sword. The town council had changed too. They no longer denied what happened. They simply absorbed it, turned it into a committee, a regulation, a tax line item. Claire watched it all from her hilltop home, a place built with no right angles and no clocks. People came to her with stories they couldn't shake, shadows they couldn't shake, shadows they didn't remember stepping into. She listened, smiled, and told them the price. Every truth has one, she said, and the ones that don't, those are the ones that cost you later. It wasn't long before the house sent another emissary. This one bore no mirror, no mark, no grand speeches, just a boy with ink-stained fingers and a ledger he never seemed to close. He moved from door to door in the village, asking for stories like a tax collector. He recorded them meticulously, not with awe or wonder, but with the bureaucratic detachment of someone assembling a legal case. Claire met him on the 5th day. She invited him to sit beneath her fig tree, offered him wine laced with nettles and memory leaf. "You keep asking others to name themselves," she said, "but I've yet to hear you speak your own." The boy blinked, and for a moment something behind his eyes stuttered like a reel catching on a broken frame. "My name is irrelevant," he answered. "Then your presence is irrelevant," she replied, smiling. He left before sundown, but the next morning the town square was filled with parchment, declarations, names rewritten, family trees altered. The blacksmith's daughter was now the baker's niece. The mayor's wife had no record of birth. Entire bloodlines rewritten overnight. Claire did not sleep that night. She walked the town in a quiet rage, reciting the names of the dead like prayers. The wind caught her voice and turned it into flame. By dawn, every page in the square was ash. Adeline returned again, dressed in winter white. "Your resistance is quaint," she said, "but unnecessary." "So is tyranny," Claire replied. "You misunderstand the purpose. The house doesn't want obedience. It wants coherence. We are the scribes of causality." Claire laughed at that, a hard, cracked sound. "You want to tell people who they've always been so they never wonder who they could become." That night, Claire dreamt of her childhood home burning, and in the flames her mother stood at the window, unmoved. She woke with blood in her mouth and the taste of endings on her tongue. The house had shifted its tactics. Where once it had stolen names, now it brokered them. There were contracts, tribunals, even currencies. A name with weight could be loaned, leased, or auctioned. In the port cities, identity markets flourished. Rich men bought titles of bravery. Young brides inherited memories of perfect girlhoods. Entire childhoods were forged and sold like silverware. The house didn't need mirrors anymore. It had laws. And in the center of all this stood Claire, neither monarch nor martyr. She was a witness. And witnesses, in time, become threats. Whispers began. That Claire was hoarding names. That she had a vault beneath her hilltop house, where she kept the true stories of people who had died twice. That her scarred hand could erase a title with a touch. That she was no longer a woman, but a cipher in flesh, a myth that breathed and brokered its own fiction. None of it was true. And yet all of it became true the moment it was spoken. That was how the house worked now, not by force, by consensus. A new council was formed in her town, appointed by the archive authority. Men and women who'd never lived there, wearing memory-slick robes and speaking in parables. They declared that history was a resource and Claire a monopolist. They held hearings, trials. They named her custodian emeritus and then stripped her of it within the hour. They passed a law saying no citizen could possess more than one name at a time. That night, Claire took a blade and carved every false name she'd ever carried into the door of her house. The door wept sap. The next morning, a child knocked. She was 7. Her name was Mira, and she had been told by her teachers that her grandfather had never existed. "But I remember him," she said, eyes wide. "He taught me how to skip stones." Claire looked down at the child, and for the first time in years, she felt something like hope. "Then you keep that memory," Claire said. "You bury it in your chest, because one day they'll come for it, and when they do, you spit it right in their face." Mira nodded and ran off, arms wide, and the sky for a moment smelled like truth. But hope, like memory, demands a cost. Within a season, Claire found herself summoned, not by force, but by implication. A letter, sealed with wax and shadow, invited her to the capital of remembrance, a city that only appeared on maps approved by the archive authority. It did not threaten. It requested. And that made it all the more dangerous. Claire arrived wearing no name and carrying no symbols. She entered through the south gate and felt a shiver in the stone. The city was beautiful in the way mausoleums are beautiful, elegant, cold, saturated with loss. Every building had a plaque. Every corner bore a statue of someone else's version of history. The scent of polished memory hung in the air. She was escorted to the Hall of Testimony, where the archivists waited. Their robes were parchment, their eyes blank. Their voices rang with borrowed certainty. "Claire Ellen Vale," one of them began, "you are charged with unsanctioned preservation." "Is that what you call remembering now?" "Unverified memory disrupts the consensus. And consensus is truth. Consensus is peace." Claire stepped forward. "Then let me give you a piece of mine." Claire stepped forward. Names they had erased, names they had edited, names they had renamed. The archivists staggered. Some wept. One collapsed. She didn't stay to finish the trial. Claire left the city as fire climbed its towers, not started by her, but perhaps allowed. The rebellion that followed didn't wear her face, but it echoed her voice. Throughout the provinces, people lit candles for their forgotten selves. But others grew louder, and that was all Claire had ever needed. Years passed. She disappeared. Some said she fled to the old woods where the trees remember who planted them. Others claimed she became a ghost haunting mirrors that refused to lie. A few believe she died and was buried under her hilltop home, which no longer appears on any sanctioned map. But in small towns, sometimes children still see her. She doesn't speak. She just touches their cheek and whispers a name they haven't heard in years. Their own. Decades blurred. The world grew more efficient at forgetting. Cities outsourced their history to curators who polished the past until it gleamed like fiction. Generations rose with no birth records, no ancestry, but what was assigned to them by bureaucratic poets. People began to fear memory the way they once feared fire. Useful, but dangerous if left untended. But even a system that controls narrative cannot predict revolt. In the outer aisles, a child named Aaron Vale began to speak in his sleep. He recited names no one had taught him, cities no longer on maps, wars that had been declared mythical. When questioned, he simply said, "They whisper when I dream." At first, the council sent therapists, then inquisitors, then silence. She visited Aaron under the guise of a midwife, carrying no weapon but a book bound in her own skin. The boy looked at her and said, "You're the one who opened the door." Claire knelt before him, "And you're the one who kept it open." They spoke for 3 days. No one remembers what was said, but afterward the child refused to answer to any name but his own, and no one could change it. Whole districts fell into dissonance, where names no longer stuck and memories refused to obey. People became unstuck from time, aging backward, forgetting forward. History pulsed like an open wound. The house could no longer contain the breach. Its emissaries faltered. Its pages crumbled. The council ordered the excision protocol. They tried to erase Claire a final time. They sent flames, ashes, but they forgot something. You cannot burn someone who has already burned herself clean. Claire did not fight them. She invited them. She opened every locked door in her house and said, "Come see." They did. None returned. Her house, now hollowed with ash and light, became a new archive, not of obedience but of choice. People came from far cities bearing broken names and bruised identities. They left whole. And one day the house vanished. Not destroyed, not buried, integrated. It became story itself. Nations rose that claimed never to have known the house, but their laws bore its fingerprints. Citizens required to recite lineage at birth, mirrors banned in schools, archives sealed with teeth and wax. But resistance had learned. It no longer gathered in cities or symbols. It moved in poems, in lullabies, in freckles passed from mother to child. A woman in a border town named her son Lucas and did not explain why. A boy in the hills carved his real name into an oak tree every week, fearing it might change without notice. And somewhere, beneath layers of official history, a shadow version of the world began to emerge, tethered not by truth, but by memory. Claire became less a person, more a function, a correction, a ghost that visited people who had begun to forget themselves. She was not always kind, but she was precise. If you had traded away your real name, she would take something in return before offering it back. Your comfort, your convenience, sometimes your illusions. But never your freedom. On the day of revision, when the council declared a global realignment of dates and identities, Claire appeared in every mirrored surface for 13 seconds. Across the world, people screamed. Time, at last, began to forget the house, not because it had won, but because people stopped needing it. The war was not between memory and forgetting. It was between submission and choice, and Claire had chosen. Unless you already know who you are. Yours, see. The letter was never found. But the spring began to glow, faintly, at dawn. Locals claimed it healed memory. Those who drank from it recalled faces they had only seen in dreams. Some wept, some went mad. Others wrote poems no one could understand, but which felt true. The spring became sacred, and then it was walled off, and then it was paved over. But the glow never left. Even the concrete hummed with a pulse you could only hear at sunrise. Years turned over like pages in a book written in fog. The Archive Authority rebranded. They called themselves the Continuity Bureau. Their robes darkened, their titles grew longer, but their goal remained: to bind truth and legibility, to standardize the human soul. They outlawed unofficial grief. They declared all spontaneous memories a form of narrative pollution. They burned libraries and replaced them with curation hubs. In kitchens and basements, people whispered their names into salt and buried it under their floorboards. Children carved runes into their toys. Songs re-emerged that no one remembered composing, yet everyone knew. And Claire, no longer flesh, no longer shadow, lived in the pause between one breath and the next. When people remembered her, it hurt, but only for a moment. The final reckoning came without warning. No fingerprint matched. No breath could be counted. Every attempt to record her distorted the medium. Pens snapped, screens flickered, ink ran backward into the quill. The Bureau panicked. They sent auditors, then priests, then soldiers. The child did not resist. But everywhere she walked, the earth cracked and whispered old names. And one morning, etched into the glass of the Bureau's main hall, in a handwriting no one recognized, was a single phrase: "I remember you." No one saw who wrote it. No one needed to. The mirrors in the city went black. The clocks unhooked from time. And the house, the true house, the ancient engine beneath all forgetting, beat once more. Not in defiance, not in hunger, but in recognition. because memory, like fire, spreads, and Claire's spark had become a blaze no archive could contain. Somewhere, in a place that does not exist on any sanctioned map, a door opens. It waits, not for a name, not for obedience, but for a question whispered in the dark. Who was I before you told me? And the answer, soft as breath, echoing from the walls that remember everything, always begins the same way. Come and see.